Shalom, friends and King of Kings family here in Israel and around the world. Pastor Chad here, and I'm being joined by Pastor Daniel. Daniel is our COO and senior pastor of King of Kings Herzliya. And it's been a while, Daniel, since you and I have got together and we have updated all of our friends and partners around the world that we're so grateful for, because you guys have prayed with us, walked with us, served us, given us love gifts, and we are blessed to get a chance to be the hands and feet of Yeshua here on the ground. But we wanted to give an update now that we're across the 90-day mark of this war here in Israel. A lot of questions we want to answer, and really the first question is the war still going on? Well, the answer very simply is yes. The war is still going on at a very high level. There's been some changes to how it's being operated, but certainly the war is still going on. There are dozens of rockets and bombs every day. We're still doing bomb shelter runs several times a week. The children are still being called out of school to a safe place. So there is a sense of it's still going on, and yet Israel is kind of ready to take the next step. And following with, is the war still going on, is the question, at what intensity is the war still going on? And I think that question comes up, Daniel, because after we expelled all of the terrorists from inside the country and we pushed them to the borders, it might feel from the outside like the majority of the war effort is done. But that's not really the case. The intensity moved from internal of the country to the borders of the country, but the intensity is still very high. But a lot has changed in the country also. It's not the same after 90 days that it was after 30 or 60 days. Pastor Daniel, what has changed from your point of view in Israel? And you can really speak of it in a broad way. What have you seen change culturally or in the country at this 90-day mark?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we started and of course this war was a very big surprise. It was a shock to the country. It was a shock to us. It came really unexpected. Now, over 3 months in, it has really become part of our lives. Everybody has to deal with it. You can't put your life on pause for 3, 4, 5, 6 months. At some point you have to say, okay, I'm going back. No matter how I feel, I have to go back. I have to go back to work. My kids have to go back to school. I have to help them, whether it's Zoom on school or in person. So it's become very normal, and that's also very strange. In your case, and maybe you're in Jerusalem, how has it changed for you? What changes do you see for you, for your family here in Israel?
I think it's pretty clear that things have shifted. Things have changed from the concept and the attitudes of emergency relief, get people out of harm's way, get them away from those borders, to that second month where it was, okay, let's make sure everybody is now settling in, they have food, they have clothing. Let's figure out a way to unify the city for prayer, and the government started to form this unity government that was temporary. And now this last month, what I've seen as a change is the attitude of Israelis. There is a certain cultural dynamic that does not want to allow terrorism to impact us. It doesn't want to allow terrorism to win. And part of the way that we operate as a country to not let that happen is to try to find normalcy. I think you mentioned that as well. Where are the ways we can get back to normal? How can the congregational worshipers and the members come back to worship and be part of services and small groups and outreach projects? And how can the children figure out a way to get back into school, whether it's in a hotel lobby or in the park or in the community center? How can we figure out a way to restock the grocery stores and figure out the shipping crisis? And this is what I've seen as a shift. It's almost like a stubbornness or a resilience of the Israeli people that say, all right, it's time to shift.
That's quite interesting. One of our soldiers from Herzliya, from our congregation, he's getting married this week, serving as a reservist in the army, comes out, gets married, goes back to the army. So it's a good thing, I think, how society deals with it. Got to go back to your life. Yeah. And I think that's what has kept Israel alive over all these years. Another question that we get asked very frequently is, what is the current situation with the hostages? Where are we there?
We were very blessed that we had an opportunity recently to specifically serve one of our hostage friends. This was 2 roommates. One is in the Army, and one was taken hostage. So we got a chance to serve both of these young men. But in terms of how it's going in the country right now and what's going on with the hostage situation, we still have 130 hostages at least that are being held. We're getting reports every week about which hostages have passed away. Not all of them are Israelis. Some of them are foreign nationals and foreigners as well. But there are still 130 being detained. Our military is trying to find them. And the challenging part about trying to find the hostages is how many people in Gaza, even if we were to use the term civilians, are somehow involved in guarding the hostages, moving the hostages, right? Or being a decoy for the hostages. And so I think this has been a challenge for the nation to embrace the idea that, okay, there are certainly militant Islamic jihadists. There's Hamas. There are the soldiers of Hamas, the fighters. But then there are innocent people. And while we want to continue to hope that there are innocent people that don't want to be part of this, I think what challenges that thought are the reports coming in about how many non-militant civilians that are engaged in covering up where the hostages are. Otherwise, I think we should have found them already. So I think that's been tough for the country to deal with. Yes, we have big movements about bring them home now, but I can assure you that from everything we know about the military, about our government, about our civilians and our nation, everyone wants these hostages home, and we value their life so much that in the current talks, and there are current talks about how to negotiate this, is how many Palestinian prisoners and criminals do we release for our innocent civilian hostages? And that's how much more we seem to value life than the other side.
What is the feeling in Israel, and maybe especially in the body of Messiah right now?
I think we're seeing this wave of, that first month wave of surprise, shock, a kind of a reactionary response. And then that second month, we started to see, well, where do we get all of these families to go to? 200,000-300,000 displaced families. Where do we send them? How do we get them settled? And how do we serve them? Yeah. But now the government is saying, hey, this could be a long war. Because we have to realize that we're not only fighting against Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in the Lebanon border, or Syria, or now Iran's involvement even more heavily. You're dealing with the people from Yemen as well. So it looks like this is going to go on a while. And I think this last month we've seen a shift in the body of Messiah from shock and emergency response and bless people with kind of the basics of food and clothing and shelter. The body of Messiah is shifting now in terms of how can we help, and it's becoming a much more long-term help. It's appliances, and it's schooling. How do we do programs for the children, and how do we bring in people from the outside of the country to come and give us an extra pair of hands to help? So I've seen that shift. We've also seen a good continued growth of unity for citywide prayer events, citywide worship events, citywide, and I mean all over Israel, but the body of Messiah comes together in a city, citywide humanitarian aid projects and things like that. So I like the unity we're seeing. I like the prayer intensity we're seeing, but certainly there's been a shift in the body of Messiah because a lot of our soldiers are now in and out, coming back and going back to the front lines. So we've gotten a chance to check in with all of the families. So I feel like we're shifting to how do we bless the nation of Israel more long term now.
Yeah, that's good. Great. So how, with that question, body of Messiah, maybe a little bit more specific, how has the war impacted the various congregations of King of Kings, of the network, and how is it still impacting those congregations?
Well, right off the bat, you're going to have dozens of soldiers. If you're in a larger congregation in King of Kings, 20, 30, 40 soldiers are away. And then if you're in a smaller congregation, maybe it's only 5 or 10, but that's still a good portion of your small congregation. And then it's not just the soldiers who are away, it's the soldiers who are injured and how you're trying to serve them. But it's also their family, their spouses, their children. A lot of the families are not able to come to worship events or congregational events and services because their spouse is away at war and they've been left alone with 3 or 4 or 5 children. And so we've really missed those families. They're not really part of the congregation these last 3 months. A lot of times you have grandparents that are trying to help out the watching of the children while the parents, one or both parents, might be away at war sometimes. So this is a challenge just to find a way to collaborate, find a way to connect, find a way to serve in a tangible way.
So what are some projects or some opportunities that opened up in the last few weeks for King of Kings to help?
We are so blessed, Pastor Daniel, because since the war began, we've had an outpouring of love and support. We want to say thank you to all of you, our King of Kings family, our broader friends and partners, those of you that have donated tremendously to the Israel War Relief Fund. And early on, again, it was this first stage emergency rescue, get people out of Sderot and get them out of the south, get them out of the north, right off those borders. And then it was moving into boxes of food and hot meals and clothing items. And then it started to shift to a little bit more long-term ideas about appliances, washing machines, microwaves, refrigerators, generators. We've had the blessing of repairing and bringing electricity to 24 bomb shelters. So that was a great project for us to be part of. We were able to come behind a music academy and provide 100 new instruments that were destroyed. All the students and all the children lost their instruments, so we were able to restore those. So that was a great project. Doing projects at the hotels. One story that needs to be told is how long these families have been gone from their hometown, been living in hotels, and we don't want them, the children especially, to go through another whole year without school. We just did that with Corona. We don't need that again. And so trying to serve the hotels, the children, the families, wherever they're at. So King of Kings, through your love, gifts, and efforts, and through the hands and feet of Yeshua here on the ground, I know that we've been able to engage in a lot of these variety of projects. Pastor Daniel, you guys at King of Kings Herzliya have been very active also in war relief. What have you been able to engage in? What opportunities have you seen?
Yeah, just recently we were approached by a hospital in Ashkelon, and they needed help with clothing for injured people, for families, for individuals who came for treatment but needed clothing. So we were able to help there and get in touch and even tour the hospital a little bit. And it's great to get that connection, not just drop off a few boxes of support, but actually talk to the people and even occasionally pray for them as we deliver and bless and try to bless them. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Another question that people frequently ask: how have we been able to serve, or have we been able to serve the Arabic community here in Israel?
Yeah, and I think this is a good question to ask too, because here at King of Kings and our family of ministries, we have congregations and ministries in several different languages and locations. And some of those locations are not necessarily inside of what we call Israel today. We have congregations in Judea, Samaria, West Bank area. We have contacts in the Gaza area that we're trying to serve. But even now, we've had the privilege of hosting outreach efforts to share the love of Messiah with the Arabic-speaking community here in Jerusalem. Pastor Sam Kawana just did a big outreach, and it was well attended and good impact on the feedback. So we are very active in serving our Arabic community, whether it's here in the Jerusalem area that we can physically touch them, or even if it's across the border where we're not allowed to go right now, and maybe they're not allowed to come here, but we're still sending food trucks to them and food boxes to them and trying to have fellowship, doing Zoom calls, and continuing to try to stir up those relationships. We feel like we're trying to be very active in blessing the Arabic-speaking community. It's, of course, very different than how we bless the Israeli community just because of access. We are blocked a lot of times. There's limited access, but even then we're still trying to find ways around that through all of our Arabic pastors and our Arabic-speaking partners.
Yeah. So, shifting a little bit, we're over 90 days in, over 3 months in. Where do you see this going? How do you see this war playing out? Is it coming to an end soon? What are your thoughts?
Well, according to the military and the government, we're told that this war is planned for a while. We're told to get used to the concept that this is going to take a while, to not try to find a quick, easy fix. And what I think they mean by that is Hamas was so deeply entrenched in Gaza, not just from the militants themselves, but the ideology was entrenched into the education system from the youngest children all the way up to university age. And the whole generation, this last 20 years or so, has grown up with this poisonous ideology to just hate Israel, to hate Jewish people, to destroy them, that we're not going to trade land for peace. It doesn't matter how much land you offer. With this kind of an ideology, the only acceptable terms would be the eradication of all Jews and Israel doesn't exist anymore. And since we cannot have that as a viable solution, that's why all of negotiations have failed thus far over the last few decades. So I think that we're noticing that it's not just a war on the physical side. It's a war in the media. Yeah. It's a war in education. And that's just going to take longer. So if we're looking ahead and we're saying, well, how does it come to an end? Well, we certainly cannot end until we are past the point where Hamas and Hezbollah are actively attacking us, because we're still being attacked every day. So we got to get past that point. And then even further beyond that point is, do we feel safe as a nation with our neighbors if they're going to continue to produce a factory of hatred and militant ideas against Israel and the Jewish people? Somehow that has to be eradicated, and I don't know exactly how. I don't think Hamas can be left in charge. I don't know that the Palestinian Authority can be trusted to come back in charge. And so without those two options, what does that leave you? Is Israel supposed to be in charge? And I'll be honest, I've talked to a lot of government officials, and I don't even sense yet that Israel knows what the end of the war is going to look like. All we've been told is get ready for this war to take a while because of the deeper components. It's not just military. It's education and media and generation brought up with poison.
So we received so much love and help, support, financial gifts from our friends. But also many people are very eager to pray, and they've been joining us from day one in prayer and standing with Israel, standing here with us together. How can they pray even more specific? What are some very specific prayer points that you would like to share?
I think all of the congregations, and the pastors especially, just need prayers for wisdom. Because when you're dealing with a wartime scenario, you have a lot of new needs, very intense needs that you need to attend to. And yet at the same time, there's still the existing needs that predated the war that you're still trying to attend to. And so for our pastors, prayer for priorities. How do you manage your time schedule when there's way too much on everyone's plate right now? Continue to pray for our finances. On the one hand, we've been just blessed and we've been receiving so much from our beloved partners on the financial side for the war. But oftentimes what happens is when people want to give to a specific area, it takes away from just operational things that needs to be done. And we're feeling that at King of Kings. While we're doing great with wartime efforts, the general needs of running congregations and the services and the classes and the children and the feeding the poor and all that other stuff tends to fall by the wayside. And so that has been a weak spot since the war began for us that we just want to mention for prayer. And then, of course, continue to pray for those that are injured. The families that are impacted, the soldiers that are fighting, the displaced families, and then pray for really what is Israel going to look like when all of this is over? Where do these families go? Have we secured the borders enough for them to go home? And if not, how is the country and the demographics going to change? Because when demographics change so dramatically in a short period of time, that changes the body of Messiah. It changes where people worship and where they go to community groups and what pastoral team needs to help them. It changes a lot on the map as well. So we certainly need prayer for the adjusting demographics in the country.
Okay. Thank you so much, Pastor Chad. Thank you for spending time with us, and especially to you, thank you so much for sharing, for praying, for investing into our lives, into our ministry. Thank you for all the love and the care that we receive. That is so important, and it really strengthens us to know that there are so many people who care about us personally, but also on a ministry level. So thank you so much.
And guys, listen, we're a small family of believers here in Israel compared to the larger population. We certainly could not do this without your help. So for all of you that have prayed, you've volunteered, you've sent love gifts and cards and financial donations, we're trying to be the best stewards we can to make sure that we're the hands and feet of Yeshua on the ground here, but we're also representing you. We're trying to represent your heart and how you want to be here, you want to help, and we're grateful to have the privilege to do that on your behalf. Thank you so much. We couldn't do it without your help. Shalom from Jerusalem.